We're going to move on now to our next big focus this evening. Is there a deficit in transparency in the functioning of the government? Yes, say editors who believe that by diminishing access to information to journalists, the process of democratic functioning in an age of openness and transparency is being affected. What does the government hope to achieve by cutting down access to journalists and at pretty much all levels, from the Prime Minister's office downwards? Well, joining us now to debate this, Nalin Kohli, spokesperson of the BJP, Abhishek Manu Singhvi, Rajya Sabha MP and spokesperson of the Congress Party, Kumar Ketkar, the senior journalist, and we'll also be joined by Shopun Dasgupta as well. Nalin, let me come to you first, because the big concern at this stage, and let me quote from this letter of the Editors Guild, it says, by delaying establishment of media interface, for example, in the Prime Minister's office, and restricting access to ministers and bureaucrats, the government seems to be on a path that runs counter to norms of democratic discourse and accountability. How do you respond?
Well, there are many aspects to it, and I have, of course, personally traversed both sides of the scale. I've, been in the media myself, handled it in terms for my party. Now I'm here representing it. So I think we need to look at it, each thing in its merits. First of all is with regards to whether the Prime Minister would like to keep a media advisor or not is really the prerogative of the Prime Minister. I don't think it is necessary for him to really go about it, because you've had a precedent. There's no requirement in terms of the work. Mr. Modi himself also, if you would just look back over the last decade, over a decade, he really hasn't been someone who has interacted too much with the media. There are occasions where, and he does interact. It's not as if he keeps away. But then, as and when, it's not on a day-to-day basis. I think he expects the people who are entrusted with that job to do it. The third is about, whether information is being blocked out. I think that's an allegation which is not correct. Because information that has to be given is given out. You have a ministry on it, you have PIB, you have the PTI, you have all the various, agencies that
Nalin,
do report.
Just the
Ministers come out with their press conferences.
Nalin, I'm glad you mentioned it.
The ministers,
let me just quote.
Just let me finish.
I'm interrupting you with a purpose.
Okay.
I want to quote from First Post, who wrote, "The Modi government has become the competitor of the national media. It possesses both the message and the medium. So you pass the message through social media and that is the end of it. You bypass journalists looking for access and information. We are a democracy at the end of the day. Surely journalists should be able to ask people questions at the highest level."
I think so. Therefore, you need to hear me out for 2 minutes, Vishnu.
Yeah.
Because I think we need to look at it in totality. The Editors Guild that has come out, and absolutely with respect, there's nothing that the Editors Guild is saying that one would take offense to, because that's how it is. Each one of the wings of or the four pegs of our democracy are entitled to their views. But as I was saying, there are ministerial conferences, there are ministerial press meets, there are occasions to meet up. That's one part of it. Now let me give you a few examples that are equally real from the other side. Today, in today's point, when you have so many commercial, public, private channels, I can tell you as a spokesperson, sometimes I'm expected to give the same bite 5 times separately, because each channel would like to show it as an exclusive from their reporter. So which means it's not only duplication, this is pentaplication of effort, as an example. So therefore, that's one. 2 is, this government is focusing on trying to do things and announce it, rather than just speak about it. So, and probably, as things start moving down the line, when the effort of making the change has started falling in gear, it is possible that you might be finding there is a more greater amount of interaction, because people may have done the little bits that are expected to do in terms of their work focuses.
Okay, let me
my last point. My last point. My last point is just my last point, because then I'm really done. Then we can debate it further. So my last point is the model that has preceded before this, which was in an election mode, and just prior to the election mode, you've often seen the media being in terms of one ministry trying to get information across about what's happening in another ministry. So that was, I would call it, the gala day of a media enterprise. But that's not how you see it at how, when there's a change of regime, when work starts becoming the focus. So I think it's a different period.
Okay, Dr. Singhvi, they say they want work to happen. They don't want too many journalists snooping around, because that just stops the process of work being done.
Stop journalists from snooping around. Sorry, Dr. Singhvi.
Yes. there are direct assaults possible on the freedom of speech expression, which is now encapsulated as an additional freedom called press freedom under article of the Constitution. That's about 50 years old in terms of case law, and there can be a direct assault which is easy to challenge, go to court. But there are much more insidious, indirect manners of curbing the press freedom. And you are now seeing, according to me, post-May, an unprecedented new set of very, very implied subtle techniques to actually throttle or reduce the area of really genuine free speech and exchange of views. First and foremost, it has become a one-way street. In fact, just like we recently just heard, it is like the government speaking from the mountaintop. You as the media must sit at the valley bottom receiving it. It's a one-way street, it's unilateral, there is no questioning, there is no subjecting yourself to public scrutiny. Very, very conveniently, it has become one way. And that obviously has repercussions on accountability. But more importantly, it is interesting that you have very, very nice new rules which never heard of. Only state-owned media shall have first access. Now in this day of 24/7, for so many years now, decades, India is proud to have this 24/7 in many ways, with all its problems, with all its negatives. To suggest that only state-owned media shall have access, to suggest that social media communication is the only method. So for the first time, social media is ahead of visual media, it is ahead of print media. These are very, very clever and unprecedented techniques. The Prime Minister chooses not to have a single press conference. Foreign tours are truncated, highly selective government media. The press, we are just told 2 minutes ago, is actually a hindrance to real work. This is the first new definition of press freedom I have heard under 19(1)(a), that if you have real press freedom, questioning, accountability, it hinders work because you are wasting time answering some questions of the press. I am told also that in certain ministries there are now mandatory CCTV cameras to monitor and control what press people are doing in particular. Now, this is something which I mean, it's not Indian culture. It's not happened in India before. You may be media savvy, you may not be media savvy. You may do more or less. But this kind of very, very clever, subtle methodologies are absolutely unprecedented, and they are ultimately designed to reduce governance in India to a very narrow, dictatorial, unilateral, single-person Gujarat model of rule. And I don't know at all whether it will last long enough at the center.
Okay, Nalin, I'll let you respond in a moment because I want to go across to Kumar Ketkar as well. As an editor, Mr. Ketkar, what are your big problems? Nalin, I'll come to you next.
Well, actually, I am surprised because I am sure Nalin Kohli must be remembering the days of emergency, and I presume that he must be against emergency and supporting press freedom at that point. And every statement that he made just now was made at that point of time by the people who ran the emergency. Like, government is doing its work, media is being informed, media is being told what decisions government has taken, media has been told about what they are supposed to finish. Where is the question of media seeking more questions and asking more questions and seeking more answers? Or perhaps Nalin Kohli would have been absolutely fit in Soviet Union or Brezhnev, where government used to do something, government used to give single point information to the media. Where was the question of freedom of media? When Gorbachev came, suddenly media realized that press freedom means much more. So I think what Nalin Kohli is doing is exactly following the rules of emergency that were developed at that time. But at that time also, let me tell you, Som, I was a journalist in emergency, and people in the ministry were not having CCTV camera. Perhaps technology was not advanced at that time, but people could meet ministers, people could meet bureaucrats, people could have access to politicians across, people could have access to politicians in the opposition as well as in ruling party, those opposition people who were not in the jail. But there was far more access than it is today. And today we talk in terms of democracy, access to media, access to social media, and in effect, what editors are told is that what you will do is being informed to you. Where is the question of you asking me a counter question? So I think Nalin Kohli would have been absolutely a perfect information broadcasting minister in place of V.C. Shukla in emergency.